So I think we have audiences joining in as well. We'll start for everyone. Get started in a couple of minutes. We're still waiting for one of the panelists because she's traveling and her alternate is also joining here pretty soon.
I'm here, Sandeep. Yeah, hi.
Hi, Shobha, ma'am. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
hi. You're welcome.
We are live on
So,
Facebook.
we are live on Facebook as well now. Yeah. So, Shobha, ma'am, we have other two panelists already here. Meenoo Rami from Microsoft and Ariel Raz from uh, Stanford D.school.
Great to
So,
meet you guys. Yeah.
Nice to meet.
Yeah.
I think it's noon here. Let's get started. Hopefully, Dr. Tristha will be able to join. She's traveling. If not, Shubha ma'am will be covering for her. A very warm welcome, everyone, and namaste to everyone from Nepal in our yet another webinar series from Adhyayan School. My name is Sandeep Sharma. I am the principal and director of Adhyayan School, and I will be the moderator for today's webinar, Design Thinking in K-12. So at Adhyayan, we've been trying to infuse design thinking and project-based learning for several years now, and we are continuously learning and improving, improvising as well. We believe that we can continue to grow only by sharing our own experiences and learning from other educators globally who have been doing the same at their own level and institutions. So that's why we are here with a panel from across the globe. So before moving forward, I'd like to humbly request all the audience to please mute your mic and turn off your video, just so that there's no distraction. If you have any questions, please post the questions in the chat Q&A, and we will be addressing those questions at the end of the webinar, along with the questions we've received from the sign-up forms. So with that being said, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panelists today. Our one of the panelists, Dr. Tristha Ramamurthy, is traveling. So if she's able to join, she will connect in a couple of minutes here shortly. If not, we have her representative from Ekya schools as well. So I'll introduce Dr. Tristha, even if she's not here first, just in case she'll be joining. So Dr. Tristha Ramamurthy is the founder and managing director of Ekya Schools and Provost at CMR University. She spearheads K-12 initiatives for the CMR group. She has experiences and exposure in Project Zero Classroom from Harvard University during her time at the US, and inquiry-based learning that she's also incorporating in Ekya Schools, the Reggio Emilia approach from Italy, and design thinking from Stanford D.school as well. She holds a doctorate in education from King's College, London. Her academic history includes a master's degree from Stanford University, School of Graduate Education as well, and a bachelor's degree from Singapore Management University. So we'll be waiting for Dr. Tristha to join here shortly. As an alternate for her, we have Ms. Shobha Sivaramakrishnan from Ekya School. She is heavily into design thinking, infusing design thinking into the curriculum for Ekya School. She has a bachelor's in education and she's a passionate educator for quite some time. So welcome, Shobha ma'am. Our second panelist here today is from Microsoft. She's Meenoo Rami. She's the senior program manager for education products at Microsoft. Meenoo is also an author of a book called Thrive, focusing on the strategy on empowering teachers. She is a national board certified teacher who taught students English in Philadelphia for 10 years and at the Science Leadership Academy. Um, Meenoo is also a teacher consultant for the National Writing Project and instructor in Arcadia University's Connected Learning Certificate Program. Meenoo has worked as a teaching fellow with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, where she led the portfolio to help teachers refine their practice through collaboration. Currently, as I mentioned before, she is working as a program manager at Microsoft, helping education, nonprofit, government organizations to accelerate their digital transformation. So, Meenoo, a very warm welcome to you.
Thank you. Namaste.
Uh, our final panelist is Ariel Raz. Ariel builds irresistible learning experiences that inspire learners to engage in creative work. He currently works as head of learning collaborations at Stanford University's D.school and holds the title of lecturer at the School of Engineering there as well. In the past, he wore a number of hats in the realm of education, from college tutor to Teach for America classroom teacher to school founder at Kip Bloom, a middle school in the Chicago South Side. Ariel holds a Bachelor of Arts in Film and Rhetoric from UC Berkeley and a Master of Arts in Learning, Design, and Technology from Stanford University. Ariel, thank you so much for making your time. Warm welcome.
Thank you. Namaste.
Yep. So as you can see, we have such a diverse panel from across the globe today. Um, but there is one thing that brings us all together today, right? That is education. So I think that might be the perfect place to start our discussion here today. So the first kickoff question for all the panelists is why did you get involved in education? Um, just a note, since we only have an hour today for a request for panelists, let's limit our questions and limit our answers for the questions within 5 minutes. 3 to 4 minutes would be great, just so that we can cover more grounds. So let's begin with you, Meenoo. I think if you could share your story on how you got involved in education and what was the reason behind it.
Yeah. So thank you for the welcome and this opportunity to meet you all. I come from a family of educators. My both of my parents were educators, and my father, who spent most of his life in India, was, a chancellor of a university, a journalist, an author himself. So I grew up around lots of books and newspapers, but I never thought that it would be something that I pursue. As often we often, think that we're not going to follow our parents' footsteps, but inevitably, in some ways, we do. My original plan after graduating from college in the States was to go to law school. But I thought it might be a good idea to actually get some work experience before going back to school for another 3 or more years. And so I joined a program called City Year in Philadelphia, which places volunteers in urban schools where additional supports are often needed for students who may not have those supports at home. And unlike the schools that I went to in the suburbs of Chicago, these urban schools in Philadelphia were a shock to my system in some ways, in terms of lack of resources, inequity, generational, in inequality and institutional racism really shaping the experiences of people, young people who, were just as bright and were, amazing in their own right, but maybe didn't have the same opportunities. And uh, as a young idealistic person, I thought I could always go to law school. Um, I have a background in English and philosophy. I could teach. I could actually do something about the situation that I see before me, instead of just talking about it. And so that's what I did. I continued to work full time as city year and got my teaching degree part time at Temple University. And it was really a leap of faith. I think teaching is hard enough, but I think teaching in a place like Philadelphia is extremely challenging for many reasons. And I just fell in love with it. It it completely overwhelmed me. It completely challenged me in ways that I never fully felt prepared for each day I stepped into the classroom. But the incredible learning that I was doing myself from my students, maybe in some ways I was learning more from them than they were learning from me. Um, and it was such a powerful experience that I just stayed with it for over 10 years. And it has shaped everything that I've done since. And that's sort of my path to the classroom.
Great, Meena. That's a very inspiring story, right? I mean, you've been a teacher for quite some time now. You're working at Microsoft, working at education products and helping people and organizations out.
Yep.
So that is a great story, and I hopeful in our audience we have a lot of educators as well. So for everybody's reference, Meenoo has written a book recently. It's called Thrive. So we might want to look into it from some motivation, empowering lessons that she might have. So moving on to you, Ariel, what is your story and how did you get involved in education and overall design and technology?
Sure. So I'll be honest and say that I didn't have much of a plan, both when I entered college and when I left it. And although that might not make for a very good story, I think it's quite common. There's a researcher, Dr. Bill Damon, who says, only 1 in 5 adolescents has a why or a purpose or is able to say, yes, I want to be a doctor or a lawyer or a teacher, whatever field they choose. But the majority of us kind of have a hard time figuring that out. And that was certainly the case for me. What I discovered is that I was able to discover what I like doing by doing it. I mean, it's simple, but it works. Through experiences, I was able to kind of figure out what felt like a good match for me professionally and what didn't. And so after graduating university, I tutored a little bit in college. It was just kind of a college job. And then I had a friend who was in the classroom. I watched them and then thought, okay, that actually seems like it could be really good for me. And then when I entered the classroom, I found it tremendously challenging in ways that were incredible. I mean, it was the hardest thing that I've ever done, and that's why I wanted to keep doing it. It was very humbling for me. I will say also, as somebody who was used to being fairly successful in school, to go in and care passionately about trying to change young people's lives and feel like you were coming up short. It was very humbling, and that I wanted to continue to get better. So maybe a different question. The reason why I stayed in education rather than the way that I got into it is I taught special ed. So I taught math for middle schoolers for a few years. And what I discovered is that I had to go about teaching math in a way that was completely separate from the way that I was taught math and the way that I learned math. And then I realized that in education, we have all these legacy practices, these behaviors, these ideas about the way the system should work that we bring into the classroom as students, as parents, and as teachers. And a lot of them they're not good. Like they're not actually good practices for learning. They're not good practices for motivating students. It's just, it's just the way that things are done. So that's why we do them. Specifically, what I discovered was games. I taught math using games, not games in the sense of like motivating students, though I think the games did motivate students and engage them more fully. The games were like based around concepts. And what I learned is like I had students who had a very hard time understanding my explanation because they were so heavy on language and how things made sense to me. And then I could give them a game, and then the game would demonstrate, say, fractions or some other math concept. And then using the game, I could use questioning strategies so that they constructed the meaning for themselves. And that was really powerful. And then I discovered that like education was actually this vastly creative field, which is not something that I had ever really realized before. And there were so many opportunities for ingenuity, innovation, and doing things differently that really could open up and impact so many lives. And so that sort of realization sparked a career where I stayed in the classroom for a number of years, and then I came to Stanford to sort of learn about broader strategies for creativity in education, and sort of led me to the role that I have now.
Yep. Thanks, Ariel. Great story, and like for everybody's knowledge, I mean, he's also been a teacher himself, and also he established a charter school in Chicago South Side. So that is an inspiration for most of the educators that have joined here today. So moving on to Shova ma'am from Ekya School. I know you are an educator right now and are currently working as a head of design thinking curriculum in Ekya schools. So what is your story behind getting into education, and how did you move into education per se?
So, Sandeep, I think I will share Dr. Trishta's story since I have been long.
Definitely.
I think I've been with her on this journey for the past 10 years since she conceptualized AK School and started this dream, actually. So, I'll give you a quick history of where she comes from, actually. Her background is she comes from a family that has started multiple educational institutions, and they have grown from a two-student school to over 7,000 or 8,000 students across K through 12 and beyond, and right now working with our university. So we have, I mean, she has quite a journey with being with her mother, and there's been I think she's learned a lot in the process of being with her mother, as well as, just finding a purpose in carrying on the legacy of education. And she's really passionate about making learning meaningful. I think that's all she's ever spoken to me about helping people, students think divergent. She always says, let's help children think beyond just their books. And she's always believed in that. She'd love for children to make use of these. She says, when they're here with us for 12 years or 10 years, what are we doing with them, especially when we're in the school level. And she says, let's let them go out equipped to face this world, given that we live in a dynamic, ever-changing kind of situation. So she always, like pushes for change, and she pushes for us to kind of bring new ideas to education, and she pushes for us to innovate at all points of time, and says, let's look at this and make sure our students are not behind not left behind in any way, right? So she'd love for our students to be out there in the in the global scene. And she says, since everybody is doing this, we're also going to do this, but we do it with with a great sense of purpose. And I do even remember actually the day she started that journey, and those 10 years ago, and how we've actually grown from there. We started AK Schools, and it's been about 10 years this year since our first branch began. And design thinking, of course, has come into our school about 5 years ago. And we started with large challenges for large groups of children. And we've done these challenges over 700 students, 800 students, working towards common causes and real world problems in our very own city. So that is where the journey began, and that's what it is. And I've aligned myself to her purpose because I strongly felt the same things as she did. And I think we've just grown in that journey together. So that's Trishta's background and mine. I'm sure there's so many more illustrious things to add to her career, and she would have been able to share her experiences with all of you. But to give you a quick context, that would be Dr. Trishta for you and her journey with AK Schools. Yeah.
Thank you, Shobha, for highlighting some key, like career milestones that for Dr. Trisha. And Shobha, ma'am, thank you so much for covering her up because I know she's traveling and she's having some technical issues. Again, let's move forward towards our discussion here. And Ariel, I want to get things started from you because we all know that Stanford D.school and K-12 lab is considered one of the pioneering institutes for design thinking overall. So it'll be great for all the participants, audience here to get an overview of what design thinking actually means for you and for K-12 lab. And also, what are the steps and models you guys follow, and what exactly K-12 lab does? Because people might know what D-school is and Stanford University is, but K-12 lab is a fairly new topic for most of the educators here. So it'd be great if you could highlight some stories, man.
Sure. Yeah. So it's a big question, and one that is not without controversy or sort of differences of opinion. Yeah. But I will give my answer, and if any of the other panelists have their own answers, it might be interesting to hear kind of what the differences are. So let me distinguish between two things. So like design thinking, I think is like, it's about structured creativity, right? What we try and do with design thinking is take something which is very mysterious, right? How do creative people create and create and sort of transform that into something that can be taught, so that creativity becomes more accessible. I think when people say design thinking, what we are particularly known for is a strain of design thinking called human-centered design, and that is sort of a series of strategies that you use where you focus primarily on a person or a group of people, sometimes called the user, and you use your understanding of them in order to sort of unlock creative opportunities. So there's sort of two things that happen in design thinking. You have a problem space over here. Sorry, I'm looking myself in the mirror, so it's hard. And then there's kind of the solution space over here. So the problem space are a lot of strategies around empathy, design research, field work, and then identifying opportunities, framing a challenge, coming up with a problem statement. That's sort of the problem finding part of design thinking, a human-centered design. And then there's a problem solving, which has to do with creating a lot of ideas, ideation or brainstorming, and then giving those ideas form through making, through creating, through prototyping, and then sort of returning back to the person you're designing for and testing those products, engaging in kind of a cycle or loop of iteration where you prototype and test and prototype and test. So that's kind of the traditional design thinking model as it's been taught. I would say that, like, we at the D-School, we feel very fortunate and privileged to be, you know, at the ivory tower of Stanford University, really wonderful institution. And the fact that people sort of look to the D-School as being a lighthouse or a sort of a place where new design work emerges. So even this methodology that I described, like, I think that that's something that we've done in the past, and we're moving in other directions. It's one thing that we take very seriously, is to try to come up with new ideas for education. So the K-12 lab does that in a number of ways that I don't think I could give like an honest accounting for in the minute that I have left. But what we do on kind of a high level is we try to identify opportunities that we see in the K-12 lab or in the K-12 sector, and then create ways where those opportunities become more accessible to educators like yourselves, to students in schools in the US and across the world. So I'll give you one example of that. So, Shobha was talking about like the sort of acceleration of change that's happening in our modern world, and the fact that teachers are sort of tasked with helping prepare students for the future, but the future is always changing. And that it's just very hard to keep up, right? An impossible task, really. So one of the things that we're doing is we're taking emerging technology, so abstract concepts like blockchain, like artificial intelligence, synthetic biology, and we're helping create learning experiences that can teach, say, a fifth grader what these things are on a conceptual level. And the idea is not like, you don't need to necessarily know how to do the code, but you need to be able to understand what the code can do, because you live in a world that's going to be further and further impacted by these things. And so by creating these kind of accessible learning experiences, now students can kind of grapple, and teachers also can grapple with the implications for what it means to live in a world where these things are becoming more and more normal. So that's a small example, and we engage in other projects of that sort.
Great. Thank you so much, Ariel. I mean, like design thinking overall is, making and being able to allow our students to become future ready, right? Like how they can actually solve real life problems. So connecting to that, I want to go towards Meenoo, because I know you've been a teacher, an educator, you're an author as well now, and you've been continuously working on motivating and empowering teachers throughout your career. And at Microsoft right now, an organization whose commitment to education gives huge importance overall to empowering school leaders and also like getting schools ready for tomorrow's challenges, somehow design what design thinking actually is planning on trying and doing. So what has or is Microsoft been doing in the front of design thinking or project based learning? I know you guys are doing a lot of different things, but just to get an insight on what Microsoft is actually doing, that'd be great.
Yeah, I think, and I want to just maybe make one point to follow up on Ariel's point around like how do different organizations define and use design thinking. And I really want to echo the empathy and the focus on the actual users and how that shapes how products get built at a giant place like Microsoft, where you have hundreds of thousands of engineers building products that shape the future. I think one of the things that, whether you're a one room schoolhouse anywhere on the planet or you're a place like Microsoft, if you cannot anticipate and understand and deeply empathize with the needs of your stakeholders, we might call them users, we might call them customers, we might call them students, but ultimately, your those in your charge, um, then you might miss an opportunity to make a tremendous difference, both from you know gains as a company, but also gains as a human institution like school. And then I think Microsoft is doing several things regarding, I think one of the things that I'm really proud of that the education team is doing, and obviously, like, I am one of many at Microsoft, and again, I don't know if I can capture everything that we're doing, but we're making an intentional effort to bring school leaders together to share best practices through our Showcase School program. So schools become Microsoft Showcase schools, and then it creates a community of school leaders and teachers within those Showcase schools. I invite anyone who's on this call to reach out to me if they want to learn more about how they can become a Showcase school. And what that does is it creates a dialogue about, well, what is it that you're doing that's working, or how are you bringing project-based learning into your classroom with the youngest students or the most challenged students? And that dialogue becomes the basis of, again, problem solving, design thinking, and collaboration. I think that's another aspect of creativity. Like, I think sometimes we idealize the lone innovator, but there's very few places where lone innovators succeed. Maybe if you're like musical virtuoso or something like that, but most of the work that makes the world go round and makes a difference in the world is often done in partnerships. And I think how to collaborate well, how to succeed and fail well together, I think that's an important aspect of bringing design thinking, that iteration, that everything that you do won't work the first time, and that it's okay to try and try again. I think that's also an important part of design thinking in schools. And lastly, I think sometimes design thinking to me feels um, like a status symbol in some ways. I think communities that often don't have a lot of resources um, often have to be creative and to be solving problems because there's no way around it. I saw much of this in my own experience as a inner city classroom teacher in Philadelphia, where my students would just come up with like the most incredible ways to solve everyday problems because they weren't flush with endless resources, and they couldn't waste a lot of resources they had, and they had to get really creative around lots of big and small challenges. And I think sometimes we value one type of creativity over another, and sometimes like privilege also comes into play when we talk about ideas of things like what is deemed creative and what isn't. And I just want to also call that out as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Meenoo. Like you said, I mean, design thinking is not only based on education sector, right? Like global, bigger companies like Microsoft use design thinking for product development and a lot of, various problem solving aspects as well.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Absolutely.
that is great for people to know here as well. So moving back to curriculum and, in general, design thinking being an emerging approach in K-12 globally. Shobha, ma'am, I would like to get back to you here. I mean, as an educator in India, like one of the biggest countries in Southeast Asia, uh, why do you think, like you've seen design thinking being adopted in Ekya itself? Why do you think what can be the reasons that design thinking is actually becoming one of the emerging approach in K-12 globally? What have you seen as the key strengths of design thinking yourself, and if there are any drawbacks or like room for improvement for this pedagogical approach from your experience at Ekya?
Okay, so I'll quickly pass Dr. Trishta's message. She really apologized for not being able to get on this. She's in a space where she just simply cannot connect onto the call. And so that's just sharing her quick apology. But um, since I have shared this space with her, I think the first thing that we really want to understand is why did we even think that design thinking was relevant in a school curriculum? Because the first reaction we've had from a lot of parents, or especially parents who are updated and who are out there learning design thinking in corporate offices and in companies where they're understanding it, and they're like, why would you be teaching my child design thinking, right? So I think a question that we've always asked ourselves is, what do students think is worth learning, right? What do they think is worth learning? They're always sitting in class asking us, why am I learning this? What is the relevance of what I'm learning? And that's every time they asked us that question, we'd go back in and sit and discuss this and say, I wonder what they want to really learn, right? What is it that they're trying to do with this education? These concepts that we're teaching them. So I think the driving force for us was really what understanding where our students are coming from, what is it that they're looking for, and understanding what the world is giving us. So kind of trying to bring both together and see what we could do to bridge both of that. And is it enough for us, asking ourselves this question, is it enough to let our children go through a school education for 12 years and let them go out and just not be able to handle themselves in the world, or use something they've learned, build skills that are required to manage any kind of situation that they're in, right? So, in context, I think design thinking really, really, showed up as this. While it looked like a novel context, I mean, novel concept, and everybody was like, "Wow, you're doing this." For us, it meant much more than that. We were trying to show children here is a process, and how every step of the process was important to arriving at a solution. For example, I would like to state one of our first projects was how might we help the local citizens of Bangalore deal with the crisis we were having with the garbage problem. We had garbage everywhere, and it was increasingly complex in the situation near the campus. We were trying this exercise out. We said, let's go ahead and put children out there and have them understand, like Ariel said, give them an experience, go in and get this human centered experience, develop empathy for the problem that you're in, understand what the problem is from all aspects, right? Wear all these hats, and you be the observer, you be the interviewer, you be the one that's recording in ideas, putting everything together, ideating, etc., etc., etc. So there are steps to that process, and we really focused not on the solution but on the process of thinking, and getting them to arrive at this problem through informed ways, to be able to state come up with solutions and say, why I picked it, because my research told me this, or I have data to show you something, right? To give an informed kind of idea, and an informed decision, or state your idea in an informed way. So that really kind of changed the way that we used design thinking in the curriculum itself. And once we introduced this as a large project, We really felt we couldn't leave it there as a, showpiece on our in a book. We said, what are we going to do with just one showcase? Let's put it out into our curriculum. So we started doing small pieces inside our science curriculum, into our computer science curriculum. In computer science curriculum, for example, you will find our grade one student saying, hey, I don't like this design of the keyboard, or there is a problem with the way this chunky keyboard is chunky. I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to design a new keyboard. So we had someone designing something that looked like a glove, something that looked like a little pencil, something that they could manipulate in a much easier manner. And then we had, what do we do with learning magnetism? What is the point of learning about magnetism if I cannot use it in my home, let's say, to fix a problem situation? Or a simple thing like, what do we do with the stray dog menace that we may be having on our streets? Just thinking about things like this and making the relevant connections. And we every time we talk about a mission statement or a vision statement, where it's somewhere where you can't touch. It's like a statement you can't touch. But no, we're working towards that, right? So in our social science curriculum, we say, here is a social issue. What is it that we can do with what we've learned to solve that problem? How can you think of ways to be a better citizen, or to have more civic responsibility, build civic sense? How can you do this? And if lack of awareness is it, how do you get there, right? So just bridging the gap of what's happening outside and what we're talking about inside, and at the same time using some kind of content to get there, is something that we were trying to do. And I think so far we've been reasonably I think reasonably successful in getting our students to a point where they can start thinking about, how do I solve this problem? I don't like this corner in the school. What can I do to make this interesting? Right? It's causing issues. The staircase is not like this. Maybe we needed to, provide a solution to get out of this, of a fire drill better. Like, right? You practice how you can get out of a situation better, or anything that causes and makes them think about a context that we're facing now. Sandeep, I'm sorry about your last question. I kind of may have, digressed, but can you repeat your last question?
So let's do this, Shobha ma'am.
Yeah.
I'll get back to the curriculum side.
Sure.
The last question was
Great.
the curriculum side.
Great.
I want to connect the dot with Ariel here, because
Great.
I know.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So I know Ariel, like one of the huge inspiration that Adhyayan School of ourselves, we were inspired hugely by your partnership, Stanford d.school's collaboration with Oracle on establishing um, the Stanford and Oracle's partnership, D-Tech High School in Redwood City, California. So that was a huge inspiration for us. So it would be great if we could, highlight some story and how establishment took place, and how you guys are actually working with on them on infusing design thinking into the curriculum, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the story of how that school came to be is doesn't have too many like exciting details. I think there's a guy, Ken Montgomery. He was a PhD student at Stanford, and was a principal before, and he wanted to open up a school. Took classes at the D School and said, will you guys help? And some of the D School folks helped out, and so the school was sort of launched through that. And he put a ton of hard work into it. I mean, Ken finished his PhD in 3 years, which is astronomically fast, and really got the school off the ground and figured out how to collaborate with Oracle in order to make it happen. So it's really owes to his hard effort. One thing that might be interesting is to talk about the different ways in which D-Tech has integrated design thinking, because they've done a variety of different models, and it's changed over year to year. So I think at first the hope was that every teacher would teach design thinking and would have a design thinking project. And so they tried that for a year, and it proved challenging because you might have a great English teacher like Meenoo, who is used to teaching, I don't know, Shakespeare in a particular way, and now they're teaching Shakespeare, but it's a design thinking project. But actually have this Shakespeare project that I've done for a few years and it's pretty good. So like the integration with design thinking might not feel natural. And so they realized, okay, that wasn't the best fit. And so then what they would do is they had something called intercession, which is I think a lovely idea. Basically, I think 4 times a year, school sort of stops in terms of its ordinary schedule. And for 2 weeks, each student is in like an AM class and a PM class. And it's around, the idea was that it would be many different topics. So they said, okay, well, why don't we use intercession to teach design thinking? And so they did that for a year. And the results were good. They were better. Teachers felt like they had more ownership over their content and domain. But then they realized that when it came towards making prototypes, right, there is a really big part of the design thinking process is learning how to make stuff. And you want to create high fidelity things, ideally, because, well, one, it's just cool if a student can make like a fully operational computer or a submarine or a new trash pickup device. But two, it's actually like a very good practical skill for things that they might do later on, and especially if they wanted to become engineers. So now the way that their model works is they've realized they want all of their students to learn how to make things. So learning prototyping and learning how to work in a wood shop, learning how to work with 3D printers, laser cutters, that's mandatory. And you actually see this sort of physically represented when you walk into the school. You walk in and you look to your left, and there's like a 2-story classroom, massive warehouse style. And on the downstairs is a wood shop, and the upstairs is like sort of computer fabrication technology, right? So digital fabrication, computers, laser cutters, and 3D printers, things like that. So, and I think they take it for 2 semesters. They take prototyping for 2 semesters. And then what they've noticed, it's taken a few years for this to yield fruit, but they noticed that as they advance to junior and senior year, the projects that they make in their other classes are really high quality. And so they're really happy about that. At the same time, and one thing we haven't talked about is if you want to teach your students design thinking, it also sort of behooves you as an institution to think, okay, what is the sort of learning experience for teachers in order to become design thinking teachers? Because of course, like very few teacher prep programs, I'm sure in Nepal, like teach design thinking, right? It's just teachers, a lot of them, unless they've been explicitly taught this, they don't know how to do it. And so there needs to be sort of this parallel trajectory of teachers learning how to teach design thinking and do design projects as students are doing it. And I think that's one thing that we've really worked with d.school, with d.tech on, is working with their teachers to like deepen their competency and help them notice if that there are problems in the student body, like, well, how do they have an empathetic standpoint? How do they see their student and really like understand what's going on in order to help manage whatever it is? I mean, one thing that's unique about teachers is that we solve like 1,000 problems an hour. Like teachers are constantly like, student needs this, student needs that. Design thinking, while a big part of it is problem solving, it also requires you to slow down and ask, like, am I solving the right problem? Have I fully understood what the problem is from the perspective of the person I'm designing for? And so it kind of takes that natural problem solving response that teachers have, and it transforms it into something that I think is a little bit slower and more methodical, but ultimately can lead to more impactful results if you're trying to kind of shift the way the school operates.
Thank you, Ariel. I mean, we were hugely inspired. Like when we were founding Adhyayan, like we wanted to focus on design thinking and technology, and there are only few schools throughout, in not only the US, globally, right, who are focusing on the both ends. So the other aspect of d.tech was technology, like you mentioned earlier, being able to understand what coding does and everything. And I'm sure during this current pandemic, a lot of schools globally have gone through some sort of digital transformation or adopting the technology side. So Meenoo, I want to come back to you on that because um, even though we are talking about design thinking, technology is always and will be an integral part, like we all know. And for any pedagogy, not only design thinking, for any pedagogy to move forward. So, since at Microsoft, you are directly involved in helping educational organizations work through the digital transformation or even accelerate their digital transformation, how do you think adopting technology or going through this digital transformation will or can enhance the infusion of design thinking or any new pedagogy per se in any organization?
Yeah, I think the possibility of um, matching the right tool to the right student and the right learning experience has exploded in the past 10 years or so, where there's so much abundance of ed tech tools out there. And in some ways the problem is actually like, what do I use, or am I using the right tool, rather than I don't have enough tools. If you have internet, if you have a device, even a phone, there's a lot that you can do. I want to call one specific tool out that you know is being ushered by Microsoft into classrooms around the world. But I think it it has immense power for design thinking and project-based learning and problem-based learning that Shobha Mim was talking about, what Ariel was talking about. If you can't have a a two-story totally decked out space, you can use something like Minecraft, which is a 3D Lego environment, endless environment where you can build anything you can imagine. And it's a game that millions of players around the world play every day, and it existed before Minecraft acquired it. But what Minecraft has done has created an education specific version of it. That's the team that I came to Microsoft to work on. I work on a different team now, but obviously it's near and dear to my heart because I did work on it. And I think the potential of it that I saw, I'll give one concrete example, is if you want to teach about climate change, you can assign, the fifth chapter of, a fifth grade textbook, and then ask students questions, or even have a classroom dialogue about it, or a Socratic seminar about it. Or you can ask students to design in small groups a sustainable home, where they have to go out and research where the home's going to be built, and in what climate, what kind of historical context does this community have, standards for housing. Maybe they talk to local scientists, maybe they have to get their project approved by the local town council. And then you bring in math, science, interview skills, presentation skills. And I think in that one small example, you went from students consuming information and then regurgitating that information in a question answer form or on a Scantron form, to students actually applying knowledge, creating new knowledge, and as Ariel said, actually creating models which can serve whatever future skills that they want to apply to, whether they want to be engineers, whether they want to be designers, whether they want to be artists. And I think that's just one very concrete examples of the ways that technology that's quite accessible. A lot of your students may actually already play Minecraft, but when you bring that into the classroom with an open mind, and if you're willing to meet the students where they are and not be afraid of a game in the classroom, then you can do some transformational work with it.
Great, thank you so much, Minu. Like you mentioned, like we can, there's Minecraft, and there's so many technological tools, ed tech tools these days coming out from various corporations, and like most of the bigger corporations are heavily involved in like their CSR activities,
Mhm.
focusing on education as well. So Shobha ma'am, I want to get back to you because we're talking about this digital transformation and like bringing in new pedagogy and technology into our institutions. But I've faced that personally, and I've been asked this question a lot of times, and I'm sure at Ekya, you and the team, including Tristha ma'am, have been facing this question when you guys infused design thinking previously. The question is like, how will this a new thing, or be it design thinking or technology, help my child's performance? Right? How are we connecting this to our state board examination? How do we convince my like family and everything? So how does design thinking overall get evaluated at a K-12 level? And how have you guys addressed this question to the family and the community, especially at Ekya?
So I think a very critical question that every parent has, like, what is that transition going to look like from a curriculum that teaches you design thinking, that is focusing on skills, maybe not what your national education policy is asking for, right? They're asking you for students to sit at an exam and putting out a grade to learning. But for us, it has always been about the learning that children have. So we have tried our best in whether it was in an online virtual school environment or in a face-to-face environment to kind of focus on the learning aspect itself. While we focus on that, we do end up answering questions like you said, how's this going to help my child? But interesting thing is our recent education policy changes, what has come in is only talking about building skills in children. It's only talking about preparing children for the real world outside. So I think somewhere that policy did add and did kind of give us that edge in terms of telling people what we're doing and how we may be on the right track, right? And how we're putting them out there. But yes, balancing it has been a challenge during just this maybe past 6 months. But I would say we've done exceptionally in terms of the way we've transitioned into the school system, and we've really thought about what's an ideal time. That I think we've really applied our design thinking knowledge that we are trying to transfer to our children into that school system itself. So we have managed to do a reasonably seamless transition, and our parents are on board right now. And I think just seeing how we manage that, they are able to say, okay, they're not doing this without thinking, right? They have thought about something, they have put multiple aspects together to kind of come up with something. Yes, we're really hoping the way that our children have been with us through this difficult 6 months has changed the way they see life, right? And the way they see education. That it's always, we've always been used to a face-to-face lecture mode, or maybe using a smart board or using something that aids instruction, but not focusing on self-directed learning or using our thinking processes to and just learning a lot of different ways to make learning look right. Learning looks very different in the way it is now, but I think we've really focused on that. Children have started learning on their own independently, independent of the teacher, maybe looking at a video and making notes and being able to translate that into an exam. So what is the skill that we're looking at there, right? So that really has changed the way that it has come up, and this design thinking has maybe we like I said, we don't really call it out and label it out as that, but we definitely go back and ask children to think back and say, what's the problem you're facing? How do you think we can resolve this? Can we think of all the possible ways that you are doing this, right? Deliberately using tools that help them think about this, and using processes of design thinking. I did make a prototype, share that with us. Let's do this in a virtual environment. Let's go into a breakout room, have a discussion, wear different hats, like I said, and brainstorm on how to come up with a solution for this problem. So I find that it is really I think the digital transformation is just, I mean, has just added an advantage, to children and shown them that you can be, a thinker and a doer irrespective of your environment. It's whether it's a face-to-face school or whether it's an online environment, and the possibilities are endless. And we seem to have, really stepped up on that. And I know Dr. Trishta is on this call, so if she does, would like to add her inputs, it would be great as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Shobha ma'am. I think Dr. Trishta is having issue technically, so
Okay.
we're
Okay.
already running out of time. So thank you so much, everyone. We do have some questions from the sign-up forms from the participants who joined. I don't see any questions posted yet in the chat box. But before we run out of time, I would like to go through a couple of questions from the audience as well, and I will assign the question of whoever it feels appropriate to. The first question here is regarding STEM education. So we hear a lot about STEM education. These days, people are also calling it STEAM education, including arts in there. Um, so is design thinking, the question is design thinking similar to STEM or integrated somehow with STEAM education? Uh, Maybe Meenoo, you can highlight on this because I know Microsoft has been working and focusing on STEM education a lot.
Yeah, we have through our partnership with NASA and elsewhere, we've done some really interesting projects recently. I think all of these, whether you call it inquiry-based education, you call it project-based or problem-based education, STEM, STEAM, design thinking, I think at its core, it shifts. I think it was Shobha ma'am who said it first. It asks the fundamental question, what is education for? And do we as educators determine that and then assign that to students, or do we co-create that with our students? And at its core, it starts with what is work worth doing and what is school for? And are we playing school, or are we actually uh, making meaningful work that transcends the four walls of the classroom and actually makes the lives of students and the communities in which they live better? And I think when we do that, then it's the Paulo Freire idea. It's not depositing knowledge into the minds of students. And so I think for me, all of it is almost like situation dependent and student dependent, but at its core, it's about starting with where the students are and then co-creating meaning of learning and meaning of school together. And I think when we do that, then I think we really begin the work of education.
Thank you, Minu. I know like this, the following question here, there's another question from the audience in the sign-up form. It's somehow related to STEM, but I think it's related to the cost of, like bringing in new pedagogies like this. And the question is, how can we extend and embed design thinking in emerging market economies and low-income country settings? Like their government schools who are who have very low budget as well, and the specific question is, can this be implemented in low budget institutions? How expensive is it to implement design thinking? So maybe Sova ma'am, since you guys have implemented design thinking at Ekya, uh, like, what do you think of this? I mean, like, can this be implemented in a low budget institution or situation as well?
I think, yes, very importantly, the term itself is about thinking. It's really not about infrastructure or about anything else. It's about helping children ideate, helping children think, helping children prototype, right? Helping children do things with. We're not looking for 3D printers and putting the product out into the market initially, right? You first helping them think. So we put them through a process of steps. We take them through simply identifying a problem, like Ariel said, all the way down to ideating and putting out this idea and say these are the possible solutions to a problem, right? I think bringing processes for thinking is more relevant to this itself. I'll be honest, we've done this over the past 5 years in three of our institutions with groups of 700, 800 students. And not one time did we have to get children to buy expensive material, focused on using recyclable material. We focused on, getting them to design things. And there are so many ways. And, if you are familiar with the process, so there are multiple ways to just depict things. Stick a post-it, say, hey, this is the button, press this, go to Mars. I mean, it's while the idea might be really crazy, you really are giving them scope to do something, to think, to innovate. And I think what we really have to do is take them through that process versus worry about what's coming out of that product and whether we've put it out on the market immediately at a school level, and at any institute level, at whether you can afford it, whether you cannot afford it, whether you're a low income school, whether you're any school. It should not really affect, but it's the process that matters. And that's what we say to all our students, our teachers, and the people that plan this. So all of us, we just believe that just do it with what you have, right? And it's more here than anywhere else. So that is one of our and like we said, we are a school, right? So when we talk about all this, we are helping them get somewhere, right? And if someone comes up in the middle and says, hey, I'd love to take this idea and do something with it, we're like, here, here's something that you could do. So we've showcased many of our solutions for the garbage crisis with a local group that was called Whitefield Rising. We said, here are ways to innovatively reduce garbage being spread. Just create awareness, create this. Here are solutions. Here's the segregator idea, or here's this idea which attacks. I wouldn't call it I wouldn't say attack. It'll help you target people's mindsets, help change mindsets, do things that we can do in this space. It is possible. I think sky's the limit. I can see there is a chat. Uh, Comment on that as well, Sandeep. Maybe you would like to answer that as well. But it is possible, Sandeep. There's no requirement for unless I have a maker space, I cannot be an innovator, right? You are an innovator wherever you are and whatever classroom you're sitting in, right? And whatever you're doing with that, yeah. So it's the way we take them through it than anything else, yeah.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Swar ma'am. I totally agree with you. I mean, design thinking really doesn't, need high investment situation, or institutions with even low budget can implement the design thinking. So we're already almost at the end of the webinar. I like to take one more question, and I think the chat question connects to this one from the sign up form as well. And Ariel, I think this would be appropriate for you because it covers the whole design thinking notion and how it was founded. So the question is, design thinking was founded on the notion that users always come first, right? So it was developed as a product development tool or a problem solving tool. And we can say it is always people centric and their needs based. So does that mean design thinking focuses more on what, for the K-12, more on what students desire to learn, and do the students drive or dictate their curriculum on what they want to learn, right? How would we design a learning experience considering this in mind? And do we disregard the existing subject and domain wise education completely that the traditional classroom would typically go through? Okay.
It's a good question. It doesn't have a simple answer. Because you can integrate design thinking into a school in a number of ways. I can list off a few different models. I think as I was talking about Design Tech High School earlier, that's one of the things I was trying to draw out is they tried it this way, they tried it that way. I mean, I think, let me try this on for an answer. I think when you embed design thinking within the culture of the adults in the school, right? The teachers, the parents, maybe the other staff, what you have is sort of an approach to how you treat your students, which is experiential and is empathetic. It does not mean that you take the traditional curriculum and throw it out the window. It can, but that's a radical departure. And, you know, you would have to convince a lot of parents to send your kids to that school. And that may or may not work. I mean, I know India has very high stakes tests if you want to get into university, and that's a reality. And you'd be, you know, you'd be crazy to not teach anything that's going to be on those tests if you know that it's going to be on it. So like there needs to be sort of a very mindful way in which you say, okay, we want to teach design thinking. This is how we integrate it. It might fit very comfortably within engineering and within humanities. The type of empathy work that we do, for example, sometimes feels like character analysis that you might do in a literature class. So there can be some natural integrations there. And then I think you can look at like milestone projects that help to bring the process together and really get a sense of, okay, this is what happens when you bring these sort of different skills that we learn in engineering, we learn in humanities, we learn in science. When we bring those together, it can be this sort of like powerful skill set. The last thing that I'll say is the methodology that the D-School has been advocating as of the last 2 or 3 years is one that's more around ability than it is a process. I think the process that we teach or that we've sort of become famous for, it suggests that design always happens in this like step-by-step way. But as it becomes more and more complex, you realize that there might just be a strategy that you want to use that doesn't, you might be at the beginning of a project, but you want to brainstorm. It's actually appropriate to brainstorm. Why shouldn't you do that, right? So there needs to be some sort of flexibility that's built in. The nice thing about that is you can start to teach those abilities in any content area. And then you figure out, okay, here's the project where it comes together and you really are trying to, you know, have a user and build a prototype that becomes, high resolution or as high resolution as it needs to be for the project. So there's not, I think, a simple answer to the question, but I would not suggest disregarding everything that's required of the curriculum, especially not at the start. And that like really the trick is instead of starting big, like to actually start small, especially if you're doing this for the first time, get some successes under your belt, figure out what works, and then grow it from there more naturally, rather than trying to revolutionize everything at once.
Yep. Thank you, Ariel. I totally agree. There's no like straight answer for this, and I totally agree on we cannot completely disregard the subject-wise learning and teaching in the classroom, especially in the early ages, right? K-12, especially given the fact that we have to go through so many examinations, not only in Southeast Asia, even globally, you have to prepare for certain examinations. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining today. Thank you so much, Meenoo and Ariel, for making some time. I know it's late in the night there. I really appreciate your time. And thank you so much, ma'am, for stepping in at the last minute and covering up for Dr. Tristha. Unfortunately, we'll not be able to take in more questions. We're already more than an hour here. Again, thank you for the audience for signing up and like sending some questions. I hope everybody learned something new on design thinking and the technology aspect. Thank you, everyone. We will be back. Adhyayan is hosting webinars like this regarding design thinking, technology, and Reggio Emilia. So we'll be back with more events like this in future. We are having a Reggio Emilia workshop in a couple of weeks, so please stay tuned in our Facebook regarding that post. So with that note, I'd like to sign up for today, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Until then, please stay safe and take care. Thank you.
Good luck with what you're doing, Sandeep. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Stay safe, everyone. Namaste.
Thank you.